Hi everyone, my name is Dave and I'm one of the rescue instructors from Michigan State University. Today we'll be talking about rescue harnesses. The four things that we want to look at today with regard to our rescue harnesses are: one, the comparison between our work harnesses and our rescue harnesses; two, the proper way to put on and take off the harness; the third area we'll touch on is the care, maintenance, and inspection of our harnesses; and then lastly, we're going to look at a new style of harness that will start to appear in the plants as the existing harnesses are replaced. Here we have the typical work harness that we see in most of the plants. It is very commonly found, used by a lot of the skilled trades folks. The typical work harness is not intended, the user doesn't intend to be hanging in this harness for any period of time. They're either wearing the harness to protect themselves from a fall, in the case of having it attached to a fall arrest device, or they're using it during entry into a confined space, and the harness is to provide a means for emergency removal from the space. It has very little padding, actually no padding on it, again because the user doesn't intend to be hanging in it for any length of time. It's made primarily for comfort, so you can wear it for long periods of time. It has a couple of different attachment points, and the ones that most of us are familiar with is the large D-ring located on the back of the harness. That's the one connection that we use for 99% of the applications with this harness. That's the standard work harness we see in all of the plants. Okay, this is the troll harness that most of the ERTs have. This is, by comparison to the work harness that we looked at, this is a rescue harness. Rescue harnesses are different than the work harnesses in three ways. First off, we mentioned in the work harness that it had no padding. The rescue harnesses have a fair amount of padding on them. Padding in the waist area, padding on the leg loops, and even in this case around the chest strap. So much more comfortable for to wear longer periods of time, and when you're hanging in the harness, as in a rope rescue or confined space rescue operation. Compared to the typical work harness, the rescue harnesses also have multiple attachment points. In the case of the troll harness, again, we see two attachment points on the front of the harness, and then similar to what we saw on the work harness, we have one attachment point in the center of the back, between the shoulder blades. The other big difference between the two harnesses is in the certification. Rescue harnesses are manufactured to meet an NFPA certification, compared to a work harness which is manufactured to meet an ANSI or an OSHA standard. All right, here we have a harness that is a good representation of the newer harnesses that we'll start to see over time in the plants. There are two important things that I want to point out before we get into the actual donning of the harness. One is the screw link that attaches the upper portion of the harness to the waist. This D-ring here is the waist attachment of the harness. This screw link is designed to be loosened and then allow the harness to come apart. We don't recommend that you take the screw link apart. We suggest that you keep the harness together. Don't separate it. Some people think that that's going to make it easier to don the harness. What we found is that just makes it more difficult. The other feature along those same lines relates to the leg loops. Here's one of the leg loops. They also typically have a connector on them that allows the leg strap to come undone and open up. And we see a lot of people taking those loose as well during the donning process. And again, our recommendation is that you don't take this apart, because once you do, it introduces the possibility that the leg loop is going to get twisted and tangle the harness, making it actually more difficult to get on. Real quickly, what we're going to be doing is donning the harness, and we'll start with the lower section of the harness, with the seat portion, and then we'll show you the proper way to get the upper portion done, and then we'll talk about the various adjustments and connection points on the harness. So for starters, we'll have Scott step into the harness. We're taking the upper section and just holding it to one side or the other, and Scott just simply steps into the harness like a pair of shorts. Steps one leg through the left leg through the one loop, and the right leg through the other. Always a good idea to have someone give you a hand with this so that you don't fall down. And as he pulls it up, the shoulder straps can simply rest on one shoulder, depending on which side you have it on. The first adjustment then to make will be for the waist strap, and there will be an adjustment on either side, both right and left, and they adjust by just simply pulling them straight forward. And you do that at the same time. because the harnesses are new. Sometimes they're a little bit stiff. You have to give a little wiggle back and forth. And position that right on your waist. That'll help hold all of the harness in the proper position, help get everything lined up the way it's supposed to be. The second adjustment then you're going to make will be to get the upper chest section of the harness donned. And as I mentioned before, we want to leave this screw link connected, and then to don the harness, we're simply going to duck underneath the opposite shoulder strap. So we didn't need to take this loose, and now we don't need to spend time reconnecting it. Everything is good to go. The adjustment point is then on, in this case, on the right shoulder. Simply take the tail and pull that straight down. It'll take the slack out of the upper portion. You don't have to over tighten this portion. Just snug it up so that everything is comfortable. At this point, the upper portion is done. The last adjustment then is in the leg straps. And here again, we want to make sure that we keep these connected. Each leg strap is simply adjusted by pulling back, and we just again take the slack out. We don't want to cinch them up too tight. We'd like to be able to put a gloved hand between the straps and our legs. We'd like to be able to put our hand in there to allow us to move that around a little bit. Let's talk about the inspection of the harness. The inspection is typically done after each use. And so we want to look at some of the key factors of that. Obviously, one of the things we're going to be looking at will be the condition of the webbing. And that means we're going to have to do a visual and a tactile inspection of the webbing. We're looking for discoloration, which may be a sign of chemical exposure. We're looking for mechanical damage, cuts, frays, damage from heat, which will show up like melting or char. That kind of is the condition that we're looking for. Because this is a sewn product, it's been stitched together, we also need to inspect the stitching. So any place we see connection points like we see here, where it is sewn, we want to look at that inspection there. We'll see it here on the chest straps, we'll see it at the various points along the leg loops and around the waist. Look at the condition of all of that. We also want to look at the hardware. So with the attachment points, the D-rings that we have here, either at the waist or at the chest or in the back, what's the condition of this? Is it bent? Is it corroded? Does it have some kind of a sharp edge on it that might be damaging to any of our software? So I want to look at each of those pieces. And the adjusters. Do they adjust freely? Do they stay tight once they're put into position? Does everything fit together correctly? Nothing's going to come slip apart? And then lastly, we'll take a look at the back here. I'll Scott turn around again. On the back of this particular brand of harness, this is where you'll find the tags for the harness that indicate its particular size, its date of manufacturer, some of the inspection points, sizing points, and actually even a place for you to record or document the inspection is contained here. So this is some important reference material that you as the user of the harness want to be aware of. And again, it's stored under this flap on the back, and it's pretty clearly labeled. The labels aren't closed underneath this little cover. So that's an important part that you want to touch on as well. That'll cover the inspection of the harness. Just like putting on the harness, having a procedure for putting on the harness is important. It's also important to have a way to take off the harness. In emergency operations, we want to be able to put the harness on quickly, and that ability comes from proper removal and storage of the harness. So we'll cover that right now. Step one in the removal of the harness is pretty obvious, but not always done. Loosen all of the straps. So we want to get both of the leg straps loosened, the chest strap loosened, and the waist straps loosened. We're extending all the straps out to make it easier for the next person to put the harness on. So once Scott gets the straps pulled out, then we'll take the harness off and we'll show you how to store it in the bag. Good, and then the waist strap there, Scott. Once you have the harness off, works best if you'll just lay the harness on the floor or on a table. This is also a good time for you to do that inspection. You have access to all the parts of the harness. You can look it over pretty good. And then for storage, to make it easy for the next person to use it, what we found works best is to take the leg straps or the loops. If you want to kind of fold or roll them up, and we just simply flip those up into the waistband. So I've kind of rolled those up, and then we'll take that whole waistband assembly and roll that together, just like it's going around a real skinny person. And then we'll take this, and again, this is usually done a little easier with a partner. So Scott, if you can come on in. The storage bag for the harness, then we just drop this into the bag. And then the shoulder straps end up on top. And that point of reference that we mentioned earlier, the large D-ring on the back, we keep that on the top of the pile. A lot of times these bags will have a little Velcro closure on them, or they may have a little drawstring. In this case it has a little drawstring. And we can cinch that down and actually pass it through that D-ring to keep a little bit of a point of reference for that harness. So that when it comes time to use it the next time, we have this point of reference. It's a simple matter to open the bag, pull the harness right on out, and it should, with just a shake or two, should come right into position so that the person that's going to use it can rapidly put the harness on and go to work.